This video will cover levels of organization as it pertains to the anatomy physiology class at West Ottawa High School. This was originally prepared by one of my student teachers back in 06-07, a guy named Mr. Weber. He actually left the field of teaching and is now a doctor. As an overview, the levels of organization involve starting with the smallest things that exist, which are called atoms, and then working into progressively larger things. The idea here is that atoms make up molecules, molecules make up organelles, organelles make up the cells, cells make up the tissues, etc., etc., and you keep going all the way until the organism level. The image here shows that we've got our atoms, we've got our molecules forming a larger molecule like DNA, let's say. We've got organelles making up cells, tissues, organs, organ system, and then finally the organism, the entire human being. A little word about each of these levels. To begin with, we have the level of the atom. Atoms are the smallest things that exist. Now, exist and have kind of like unique identities, I should say. Obviously, atoms are made of smaller things, protons, neutrons, electrons, those kind of things. But for the most part, the atom is the smallest functional unit that we are going to deal with. There are a variety of different atoms that you are going to need to be familiar with as well. When dealing with the atoms, the ones that you're going to need to be most familiar with are most easily remembered with the little mnemonics CHNOPS. Stands for carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Carbon is the basis of organic life. It is present in all living creatures. Hydrogen is huge. Wherever you find carbon or oxygen, you can bet there's going to be hydrogens attached to it. Just think about water, for example. Water is made of hydrogen and oxygen. Nitrogen is huge. Here it lists amino acid, but whenever you think of amino acids, you should be thinking of proteins. These are places where you will find lots and lots of nitrogen. Oxygen's found on all kinds of things. It's found in the proteins, it's found in carbon chains, it's found in sugars, it's found in dang near everything. Phosphorus is huge when you start dealing with things like lipids in fat structures, and it's important all the way around. Sulfur is also important in living things, again found in lots of proteins and whatnot. Just remember CHNOPS and you'll have a good overview. Now, do realize that there are 88 naturally occurring atoms, any of which can be found in the body, but these 6 right here are the most abundant, without question. Definition of a molecule. Molecules are going to be things that are comprised of atoms. Now we have molecules that can hook together to form what are called macromolecules. A macromolecule is just a great big molecule. Now some of the molecules that are huge and important in humans and whatnot are water, the oxygen molecule that you get out of air, the CO2 molecule that you exhale. DNA would be a good example of a macromolecule because it's comprised of lots of other smaller molecules that are all hooked together. Similar with proteins. Proteins can be outrageously big molecules, as can some of the carbohydrates. For example, this picture here, we have glycogen. Glycogen is made of a whole bunch of individual sugar molecules. So this is one sugar, one glucose molecule here. And you'll see that this glycogen includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them chained together. That chain would actually continue every which way. Some more standard molecules would include the water molecules that you see down here. Now, you're not going to need to know all of the molecules of the body. That's just outrageous. I just want you to be familiar with the idea of a molecule. Just recall this information from your chemistry course. And I will be explaining to you the various molecular structures as we move through the course that are pertinent. Now, if you take a bunch of molecules and macromolecules and put them together, what you can start to do is form some other larger structures. Now, if the goal is to build a living thing, these next larger structures are going to be comprised, or are going to be called cellular organelles. Now, this image here shows a typical cell, and you will see lots of cellular organelles listed. You'll see a cell membrane. You'll see endoplasmic reticulum. You'll see ribosomes. You'll see the nucleus and the nucleolus. There's going to be mitochondria, a variety of different things. Again, you're not going to need to be forced into knowing every single organelle for this course, but you should be familiar with the idea of some of these. Hopefully you're familiar with the idea that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. They're going to be very important in active cells like nerves and muscles. Ribosomes are going to be important in cells that produce lots of proteins. A lot of the various glands, hormone-producing glands, for example, are going to be rich in ribosomes to produce those proteins. Now, when you take a group of organelles and put them together, what you end up with are cells. Now, the cell is the smallest unit that is considered to be actually alive. Now, some cells are capable of living completely on their own. Bacteria are good at this. The various little protozoans and stuff that float around in pond scum are good at this. But in the human body, we're going to have differentiation. We're going to have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of different cells that are all working together to keep us alive. And, just a quick overview: muscles, blood, bone, and the list is going to go on and on. But any one cell by itself is considered alive. Here's where things start to get specific to the anatomy course. In this course, we are going to have our first unit revolve around the topic of tissues, not Kleenex, but the various tissue types of the body. And you're going to need to know these for sure. And the whole first unit is going to be about getting you to learn them. We're first of all going to study epithelial tissues, then connective tissues, followed by muscle and nerve tissue. And this is going to form kind of an outline of the first several units. Now, what the definition of a tissue is: a group of common cells that work together. So if you look, say, in this image here, what you're going to see are a whole bunch of tiny little cells that are all stacked up on each other like bricks, but all the cells look similar to each other, so they're members of the same tissue. Over here we can see these cells here that kind of look like little blobs with spikes coming out of them. They are all similar to each other, and as such they are a particular type of tissue, in that case nerve. These similar cells here are all muscle tissue. So when you have a group of cells clumped together that are similar to each other in both structure and function, that is the definition of a tissue. Now, if you take a little bit of epithelial tissue, a little bit of connective tissue, a little bit of muscle, and a little bit of nerve, and mix them together in various amounts, you can build yourself an organ. And any one organ is going to be comprised of each of the four tissue types. There's going to be some epithelial, there's going to be some connective, muscle, and nerve. In the example of the heart, the hollow chambers inside the heart are going to be lined with the epithelial tissue. The connective tissue would make up that whitish fat that you see around various places. The blood that flows through the heart is a connective tissue. The heart muscle is obviously muscle tissue. And of course there's nerve in the heart as well. Nerve that helps the heart beat on an appropriate rhythm, and nerve, especially nerve that communicates with the brain and senses things like pain and whatnot. For example, people suffering from a heart attack will definitely feel that. So the heart is made of a little bit of epithelial, a little bit of connective, a little bit of muscle, a little bit of nerve. If you throw in the brain, what you would have is something that's mostly nerve and much less epithelial, connective, and muscle. So hopefully that makes sense. A organ An organ is comprised of each of them. Now, if you take, for example, the heart, and you include along with it not just the heart, but the aorta, and you throw in the portal vein, and you throw in the vena cavas, and you throw in the subclavians and all the various other arteries and whatnot, what you're going to end up with is called a system, specifically an organ system. So an organ is a group of tissues working together to do the job of one organ. When you take a bunch of organs together that work together for a common goal, you end up with something called an organ system. Now, when you move beyond that, from organ system to organism, what you end up with is all of the various organ systems working together in here. Every individual person has 11 organ systems within their body. In actuality, there are 12 organ systems, but that's because we differentiate the male reproductive system from the female reproductive system. So any one individual only ends up with 12 of the organ systems. Ends up with 11 of the organ systems, even though there are 12. So in summary, realize that each level is made of things that came before it. The organism is made of the various organ systems, the various 11 organ systems. Any individual organ system is going to be made of a variety of organs. The organ is going to be made of the 4 different tissue types. Tissues are going to be made of cells. Cells are going to be composed of a variety of organelles, and organelles are made of atoms, molecules, basically what we can just lump together as chemicals. So that's the overview of the levels of organization. Hope this was helpful.